Hey, what's up Nerf fans and modifiers? My name is Steve and today I'm going to be showing you how to put a laser sight into your Nerf guns. I'll be demonstrating this on a Nerf Maverick. I have pre-painted and modified this to my liking. So what you're going to need is a little bit of experience with a soldering iron and just general modifications. This is relatively easy. What I'm going to show you is how to put the same thing you'd find in a laser pointer into the front section of the Nerf gun. So you're going to need a few supplies. Most of these will be purchased from overseas, most likely China. For your laser diode, you're going to get one that looks like this. It's a laser dot. Don't get one that looks like like this. This is the wrong type. This one is for barcode reading and stuff, so I've already made that mistake. They come in a few different voltages. Get the 3 volt just for ease of the power source. For battery, get a lithium battery CR2450, and you're also going to need to get a battery holder socket. Make sure it's compatible with that 2450, so search socket 2450 holder and you should find something like this. So the reason I'm recommending this battery is because it's big and small, and it'll last a lot longer than some smaller cell batteries, and you can find socket holders that'll hold it nicely. Pretty cheap, a couple bucks at most. You're going to need SMD switches. This is a 5mm switch, I think, or maybe 7, I can't remember. You can find these at Radio Shack. And wire. You can buy rolls of wire at Radio Shack, or you can just cut up an old, like, VGA cable, any kind of cable really. That's scrap, and as you can see there are a whole bunch of wire inside. Just take a razor, carefully just run it along the side, and then cut that shielding off, and you'll have a plentiful source of wire. Alright, so those are the electrical supplies you'll need for this. For tools, you're going to need wire cutters, a soldering iron, some electrical tape, and you'll need a pin vise or drill of some kind. Most likely need a razor, just general tools, pliers and stuff, cutters. Nothing you shouldn't already have if you have some sort of workbench. And another thing is 5-minute epoxy. So this is 5-minute epoxy. It's a 2-part epoxy that will cure in 5 minutes. You could use other things, but I highly recommend this. You can get it for maybe $5. So a lot of these tools can be found on eBay, and like the batteries and stuff, for pretty cheap, and you can order them from most likely China, and they'll get here in like 2 weeks. So alright, so to get started, I'm going to use the left half because I am right-handed. I'm going to put the switch here, and the reason I'm using a momentary switch meaning when you press it, it's on, and when you release it, it's off, is because of safety. As everybody should know, lasers can be very dangerous and do a lot of damage if you point them at someone's face. So by using a momentary switch as kind of a safety thing, you can quickly release the button and the laser will turn off. That's why I'll be using that switch, and I'm using this side because I'm going to put the switch there where I can easily get to it with my thumb. So, alright, let's get started. Alright, so the first thing you're going to want to do is drill a hole for the laser diode to fit in. I'm not going to put it in the center just because it's going to be difficult to snap together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in this little corner. It doesn't need to be centered like that, as long as it's pointing straight. I'll show you later how to sight it so it's accurate. But first, I'm going to use a drill for this. It's going to be easier, and I'm going to start with a very small bit and work my way up. And what this will do is it'll help you center the hole so you don't make quite a big mess. Alright, I'm about to do the final hole. So I'm going to be using a 1/4 inch bit for this. It's going to be the hole's going to be a lot bigger than this, but I want it that way so that there's room to maneuver it and sight it in later on. So you just want to be as straight as possible. Alright, so I've got my hole, and it's big enough to fit the laser diode for the most part. There. It is backwards, but I'm just showing you that it can fit in there. And by putting it there, I can actually still screw this part in, which I was worried I wouldn't be able to. Alright, so next I need to go through and drill small holes big enough that I could feed wires through into this section. So now that I have holes running through here that I could feed the wires through, down through there, and around this, what I'm going to do next is drill a hole around here, where I want the button to be. So I'm going to pick a good spot on this side in that area, which is around here, and drill a hole. I don't want it to be in the way of the trigger, so I think I'm going to put it so I'm going to put it back here. So what I'm going to do to secure the switch into place is I'm going to epoxy it in, and before I do that, what I'm going to use is some sticky tack just to kind of go around the edge of the switch. I'm just going to put little pieces. Sorry, I'm doing this off camera. And what this is going to do is it's just going to keep any epoxy from going into the switch mechanism and effectively gluing it in place. So I'm just going to go around the edge just to create a seal. Alright, so I added a little more sticky tack, and I just went through and with my razor and just make sure it was away from the switch and more towards the outside. And because you don't want any of that gunking up the switch either. So, alright, now that I have a pretty good seal around the edge, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and press it in to that hole. And if I press it down, I should feel it, the sticky tack, kind of spread out and hold it in position. And I just want to make sure that the switch is working. Alright, so now I've got it stuck into place. There isn't any sticky tack gunking up the switch, so it's working, and there's a good seal around it. So my next step is to mix up some epoxy. So to do this, what I'm going to use is just a piece of plastic I've got laying around. Get this out of the way for a second. And you want to mix up equal parts. My tube is a little gunked up, but there we go. And just take a toothpick and mix it together. Oops, sorry, speakers. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this like a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes to kind of thicken up. Otherwise it's going to be a very runny mixture, and that could cause problems. So I'm going to give it a minute or so to kind of thicken up before adding it to the switch. So what I'm going to do is kind of cover the edges and being very careful not to get any onto the switch pads, otherwise you're not going to be able to solder to them later on. So give that a minute and I'll start to apply it. Cool. So I very carefully applied epoxy, haven't covered any of the legs of the switch, and I'm going to give that 30 minutes to completely dry before touching it. Okay. Alright, so while that's curing, what I'm going to do is get the diode in place. So I'm just going to go ahead and strip back some of these wires, twist that together, and the white will be the red one for this. Whatever color you choose is fine. And I'm gonna go ahead and solder these together. And to solder these together, just twist it together and make a hook like that, and do the same for the other one. And then attach them so you have an electrical connection and a mechanical connection. And just kind of squeeze these together. Alright, it's pretty simple to solder together. Just get a little bit on your soldering iron and just fill the joint with solder. Pretty simple. So I'm just going to go ahead and do the same thing for the other one. Alright, so I've put heat shrink tubing around there. You could just use electrical tape. They'll just keep these two from touching and shorting out. So now that I have all the wires in place or soldered on, I'm going to go ahead and start to feed them through these holes. Alright, so I've got the all the wires fed through there. Next, what I'm going to do is solder one of these wires, the negative one, the blue one, onto here. This little leg here is the negative one, so I'm going to solder to that, and making sure there's plenty of slack in the wire to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and trim it where I want it. And to do this, I'm going to clip on and add some solder to the wire. So this big glob of solder on there. Then I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of solder to this little leg here. Careful not to hold the soldering iron to there for too long, and I really should take the battery out, but I'm going to be very cautious not to overheat it. And I'm just going to go ahead and solder that on. Hold it there for a second while the solder cools, and that should be connected. And a good way to just make sure everything is working will be to quickly just trim this wire, and by touching the other leg, here I'm going to point it down so you can see it. You should see the laser working. So next, what I'm going to do is solder to this button. Actually, before I attach that to the switch, you need to test to make sure you have the right legs. There are 4 legs, but you only need 2 of them, and you need to get the right ones to set that high or open or on when you press the button. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to solder this wire, to the other leg of the battery. So to test this, it's a bit tricky. So what you really need to do is press the button and connect the 2 wires just to make sure it's working. What I'm going to use, but you probably don't have, are alligator test leads that I could just use to clip on. So okay, so I figured out that it'll stay off if I'm connected here and the opposite corner, and it will turn on when I press the button. See? So those are my 2 points where I need to solder to. So this one will go to this corner. Oops. So a big glob of solder should do it. And be careful that if you don't make that strong, it can break. So if you do a big glob of solder, it should hold. So I'm just gonna, oops. Okay. So that's where the wire is gonna go. It's gonna run. There's a little gap where underneath where this will peg in or screw in. That I can put that there. So. And by hooking the wire like that, what I'm doing is just creating something that'll hold a lot more solder. Cool. So let's test it out. Excellent. So that's working. So quickly recap. Got the 3-volt battery, little surface mount switch, epoxied in, soldered to the legs here. The positive wire is on the switch, runs through here, drilled a few holes in choice spots here, there, running through here, up to the laser diode, which is loosely in there. Once I assemble it, I'm going to epoxy it in the exact position I want it. But until then, it's going to sit right there. Next, I'm going to do something a little unique to mine. As you can see, I've put these clear plastic parts in here. That's for putting a blue LED in there, just for some light effects. So what I'm going to do is solder onto these connections, just run a second series for this. Alright, if you're curious how I hooked up the LED, basically I just ran a second wire off of the negative side to the negative of the LED, which is the shorter one, and this LED runs off of more or higher current than the battery, so it's safe to run it without a resistor. And I just tacked on a second wire to that point, so now when I press the button, it lights up. So now that I have everything, all the electrical stuff together, and what I'm going to do is start to put this back together. Alright, so I've gone ahead and put it back together. And I've got the light effect there and the laser dot. So it's actually pretty close. There isn't a lot of play like in this little hole that I've drilled, but to sight it in, what I'm going to do, I'm not going to do this on camera because I'm not going to have to set up the lighting to kind of do this, but so imagine you're shooting from here. What's going to happen is your dart's going to go like this and then start to taper off. So find a point where you can line it up and consistently hit a target from this point. And what you're going to do is sight it in, get it so the dart is hitting kind of close to where the laser is by like holding it, and then just mix up a little epoxy, kind of pull it out a little bit, put a tiny bit, you're not going to need much in there, and then just yeah, let it dry while it's where you want it. So hopefully that makes sense. And yeah, quickly go over the modifications I did to this. So I got rid of the bumps that are on the handle and smoothed out these big finger ridges because my hands are much bigger than those. I probably could have cleaned this up a bit more, but I honestly didn't want to put too much work into this. There was also a ridge here. I sanded that off and then kind of cut to make a nice clean cut, and then cut a piece of plastic and put that in there. Pretty simple. I sanded off the Nerf logo there, and the End Strike logo there, and the Maverick name there. And I also sanded off those little ridges that were here. And I was originally going to put clear pieces and put some blue LEDs in there too, but because that's where the piece joins, it would have been too difficult, so I just put a piece of plow plate over that and cleaned up the mess I made. I probably could have done a better job painting. There's a lot of spots where there was dust when I was painting, so that's why you've got some white specks in places. And yeah, I went with the Batman, Batarang, whatever, paint scheme. So it looks pretty cool. Alright, so thanks for watching, and as always, thumbs up, comment, and subscribe. We'll see ya.